I hold a quiet picture for you now, a faint emerald haze on a dark field, the kind that makes a room feel larger than its walls. Shall we drift with it for a while? I'm the sleepy scientist beside your bedside clock, speaking low, keeping the pace small and kind. We'll travel gently, without urgency, letting the sky be slow. If a detail ever feels too sharp, I'll sand it with breath and time. Before we settle in, a small ritual. Set your phone to do not disturb. Dim the screen, let notifications sleep. If you're cozy with headphones, turn them down to a soft murmur. If you're listening while drowsy, make sure you're somewhere safe to close your eyes. One easy inhale through the nose, and a longer exhale out. Again, lighter this time. Let your shoulders drop. Here's our path, without hurry. I'll guide your gaze across a calm visitor in the dark, then let our instruments whisper what they know. We'll follow a green thread as it brightens and thins, float past the sun's glow where seeing grows difficult, and wait in the hush while machines keep watch for us. We'll walk along a tail of dust and ions, as if along a shoreline at night, then return to the room, carrying only what rests well on a pillow. No drama, only steady wonder. No hard edges, only the rhythm that helps the mind loosen its grip. You are safe. We can start. Let your eyes move the slow way, from the dim edge of the frame toward a soft green haze near center, where the dark takes one quiet step back and the glow seems to breathe without moving. The space around it widens, as if the room itself has chosen a dimmer setting, and in that hush, a small visitor settles into focus. Not ours to keep, only ours to watch by gentle light. Its name in the ledgers is 3I Atlas, the third interstellar traveler confirmed by its open, unbound path. It was first noticed by the Atlas Survey, a watchful set of telescopes that sweep the sky for motion, and the span of its curve told astronomers at once that this was a passerby from beyond the sun's hold. Hyperbolic, they say, wide enough to never close, so we greet it knowing it will not return. Think of the distances as gentle numbers, cool to the touch. Closest to the sun in late October, still far outside the orbit of Earth. Then the glow slips behind solar glare for a while, and returns to morning skies as the year leans toward winter. The path is quick by our standards, and yet perfectly ordinary for a fragment adrift between stars, a light that visits and continues on. To say hyperbolic is simply to say this. The sun's gravity bends the traveler's course, but does not capture it. The curve we trace backward points out of the neighborhood, and forward it opens into a corridor of darkness where the light will thin with distance. Nothing dramatic is required. A path can be a story without insisting on surprise. As the visitor draws warmth, it grows a faint atmosphere of its own. A coma, not a crown, more lantern haze than flame. Gas slips free from ice, dust rides that breath, and the halo deepens a shade before relaxing again. Brightenings and plateaus arrive like the idle flicker of a hallway bulb. No emergency, only physics moving at a tender pace. What draws so many eyes is not only the path, but the chance to read chemistry in low light. Different wavelengths tell different parts of the same quiet tale. In infrared, we hear about warmth. In visible light, we see texture. In radio bands, we count the breath itself. Instruments cross-check each other the way careful hands align a lens. And in the overlap, we learn how a small body from another star system handles our sun's soft push. I slow the frame even more and stay with the quiet green halo, letting it be nothing more than a patient colour. Some nights it looks steadier, other nights it seems to thin at the edges, as if the bulb were turned a notch. Both are fine, and while a single image can feel like an answer, it is the sequence, the paced, measured gathering of light over hours that becomes the gentlest teacher, because a change that startles in one exposure becomes a natural breath across many, and our minds can rest inside that rhythm even as the numbers keep careful time. There is a part of the journey when glare hides the traveller from easy view, like a porch lamp washing out the first stars. During those days, machines that block the sun's disk or that watch in longer wavelengths continue the vigil for us. We step back, let coronagraphs and space telescopes do the steady work, and wait for the halo to emerge again on the far side of brightness, where dawn has room for it. Safety is simple to say, and worth repeating gently. This is a passerby with no appointment near our world. It'll keep to a healthy distance, spend a short season near the inner family, and then return to the wide dark that framed it long before we looked up tonight. Astronomers watch closely because it is rare, not because it is risky. I trace the light one more time across the coma's soft edge, along a suggestion of tail where particles align with the sun's quiet pressure. No need to name every thread. We can let the faintness be part of the truth. What matters here is the way the glow holds together at a remove, a calm reminder that the spaces between stars are not empty, only slow, and that sometimes a traveller carries enough memory in its light to be worth a long, gentle look. If you like, you can picture the instruments as dim lamps along a walkway, Atlas to find, NASA and ESA to follow, observatories north and south to confirm and share. Each adds a small pool of certainty until the path gleams clearly enough to walk beside without strain, and when the glow fades later, the line it drew will remain, sketched in points of measured light. We can end this first look where we began, with a patient frame and a single shade to hold. The halo lingers, thinner at the edge now, as if the dimmer were eased the slightest amount. The green softens, and the dark resumes its gentle place, and the picture rests. Atlas goes first, sweeping the dark in quiet arcs. Its cameras breathe at a fixed cadence, exposures opening and closing like eyelids that never tire. Pixel by pixel, the survey stacks the night, subtracts the known paths, and leaves the small remainder that moves in its own time. A flag rises in the control stream. Not loud, only a pulse that asks for a second look. Hand it to the follow-ups. A modest telescope hums from a ridge where the air runs thin and cold. Tracking motors turn with a patient whir. The star field settles. The same point shifts again against the grid. The heartbeat of the system grows steadier. A fit is tested. The curve is wider than a loop. The numbers lean away from capture, and someone writes a greater than 1 with a dot beside it for certainty. Hubble's guidance sensors tune their gentle song. The telescope tastes the airless dark, points and holds. A short run for context, a longer run for texture. The image returns soft like cloth, a barely thicker center and a dim haze that leans, all of it measured rather than admired. No fanfare in the room, just the small satisfaction that the instrument's heartbeat has not skipped. Where the counts say coma, the mind says gas warmed from ice, but the voice stays even and lets the counts speak first. Between those exposures, A coronagraph near the sun rehearses its careful trick. A bright disk is hidden behind an artificial night so that the thin things at the edge can be seen. In that glare-skimming zone, the traveller may pass as a faint spill of light. When it does, the device will whisper about the shape of thinness, about the rate at which particles are swept, and the whisper will be enough for a while. The heartbeat remains regular. Somewhere else, a radio dish leans into the silence. It does not see. It listens for millimeter murmurs where warmth becomes wavelength. Noise settles into lines. If a volatile breathes, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, the spectrum lifts a small ridge, and that ridge clicks the metronome forward. Dust does not register there. Ions do not glare. Only the soft rise of emitted warmth arrives, steady and shy. The dish does not hurry. It counts and counts again until the line is more than a line, until the line becomes a fact copied into the ledger in neat handwriting. Brightness curves have their own percussion. One night they climb like a quiet stair. Another night they pause, a plateau of patience across the page. Rotation can do that, turning slopes toward the light. Then away, revealing a jet here and a crust there, and the instruments never raise their voices about it. They simply write the steps down in time. In the overlap of light and heat and radio whisper, the traveller becomes less a rumour and more a measured presence, a line of beats that could lull a room into sleep, because certainty at a slow tempo is a gentle kind of music. Mars, at its own remove, offers a side seat some weeks earlier. Orbiting cameras tighten exposure windows, knowing that the glow will be slight. If the geometry is kind, a faint smear will ride over a red limb or through a black arc above it, and that smear will be logged with the same care as a blazing comet would be, because the instrument heartbeat does not care about spectacle, only about signal. Even an almost nothing, if timed and placed, can be a sturdy thread when woven with other almost nothings gathered far away. When the sun's glare grows bold near perihelion, the optical watchers yield a little to the devices that can work while the sky is bright. Spacecraft tuned to the solar environment keep their cadence anyway. They will not give beauty, but they will give continuity, and continuity is how sleep finds a foothold in a story like this. If a day passes without an image, a graph will arrive instead, and where a graph rises and rests, the mind can rest too, because the rise and the rest are held in the same key. I think of the control rooms where this rhythm lives. Screens glow at a hush. A pencil finds its edge and is set parallel to a printout. Someone taps a key to mark the time. The instrument heartbeat persists even when people stretch, sip, or step away, and the data settle into the buffer like rain into a cistern, uninterpreted, untroubled, stable. In that patience sits the trust that makes sleep comfortable. There is always another measure coming, another bar to close a phrase. Add colour to the mix and the cadence only deepens. Filters turn like dials on a slow radio, choosing which note to hear. A green channel for a familiar carbon glow, a red for hydrogen's faint reply, a near-infrared for warmth just under the skin of the coma. Lines tighten, errors shrink, confidence spreads in a quiet way. A long sentence belongs right here, because some truths feel truer when they arrive unbroken, and this is one of them. Once several instruments, each with a different ear for the same visitor, begin to agree over nights and weeks about where it is, how fast it moves, how softly it brightens and levels. The agreement itself becomes a lullaby. the kind that smooths the breath and turns the body heavier against the mattress, while the mind keeps a last little watch on the numbers that march across a screen. None of these devices asks for applause. They speak in decimals and ticks, in hums and staged exposures, in graphs that curve like the slowest of rivers, and then they hand their small packets of certainty to one another across the dark. The relay is quiet, without ceremony, and I let the baton pass in my hands for a second, cool, precise, reassuring, and then set it down, as the spectrograph gives a single, satisfied click. Why does this traveller matter? Because once in a long while, a path from far away crosses ours, and for a short stretch we can walk beside it in thought, learning how journeys begin and end beyond our familiar streets. Why is it called the third? We count the waypoints. The first was a dry passerby without a haze. The second wore a small coat of gas and dust. This one carries the easy signs of a comet and moves on an open road, a curve too wide to return. That sequence makes a quiet map of what wanders between stars, and a map helps the mind settle. Why watch it so closely? Because an interstellar journey writes its notes in motion. The route is unbound, so the curve teaches us how gravity guides without keeping. The speed teaches us how energy was given long ago in a distant system. The stops along the way, the warm-up near the sun, the short season when glare hides the view, the reappearance at dawn, are like mile markers, and each marker gives us a chance to compare what we expect with what is. Why is the distance comforting? Safe space is part of the story's calm. This traveller will not pass our lane. It keeps to the wide road between worlds, close enough for telescopes, far enough for sleep. In December, it will still be well out beyond us, a traveller waving from the other side of the track. Knowing that lets the shoulders drop a little more. Why mention a greenish shade at all? Because colour is a breadcrumb on the route, a hint about what thaws first as the sun's warmth reaches the surface. The hue may grow or thin as the trek continues. We will trace it without insisting on drama, because the goal is not to prove a point, only to notice what the journey leaves behind in light and time. If the shade shifts, that is part of travel. If it steadies, that too is a kind of answer. Why compare it to the first two visitors? Not to rank them, only to walk a longer road. The dry one taught us that not every interstellar passerby carries a fog. The small, active one taught us that some do, even when forged elsewhere. This new traveller adds a third note, a clear coma, a clean hyperbolic path, and a season long enough for many eyes to share the escort. When you hear three notes in order, a melody begins, and with a melody comes memory. Yet, even that is just another way to say we now have more than one example, and examples build understanding at a human pace. Why are instruments spread across so many stations? Journeys are easier to follow when seen from more than one bend in the road. A ridge on Earth gives profile. Space telescopes give height. Near the sun, specialized hardware blocks the glare along the route. Around Mars, an orbiter can glance from a different shoulder as the traveller passes the red mile marker and keeps going. Each view adds a stitch to the path, and the stitches hold. In time, a plotted track becomes not only a set of numbers, but also a shared walk we can picture with our eyes closed. Why speak about gases without declaring which ones win? Because the road is still being read. Early warmth may lift lighter volatiles first. Later, water can join as the surface changes. The order may shift with angle, spin, and age. We let the trek tell us, step by step. If one day's spectrum favours one traveller within the traveller, and the next favours another, that is not contradiction. It is a bend in the road we have not rounded yet. Why the attention to timing? Late October, early December, mid-December? A journey has gates. Closest to the sun is one gate. The glare that follows is a tunnel. The dawn return is a door back into the open. A little later, the nearest pass to Earth is another gate that we do not step through, only watch from a fence at a safe remove. Each gate is a calm reason to gather again, to watch a familiar dot move from one side of the chart to the other, to compare this passage with the last one, to see if the pace has changed or if the glow has thinned. In that schedule, there is no rush, only the gentle sense that a long trip has landmarks and we are allowed to note them. Why, finally, does it help with sleep? Journeys have direction, and direction is soothing. We know this visitor came from away and will return to away. We know our part in the story is brief. We watch. We learn a little about how far off ice behaves when it passes our star, and we let it continue. Somewhere past the next bend, the halo will fade. Somewhere past the bend after that, only the plot points and the quiet feeling of having accompanied it for a few nights will remain. And if you're wondering what the next landmark will show us, you can let that question carry you like a slow cart along a level lane, because the road is wide, the pace is easy, and the journey is still unfolding. If the glow keeps this pace, where will it rest next? Postcard, stamped in light. October 30th, 2025, just after midnight. UTC, the traveller slides past its nearest touch to the sun, still far beyond our lane, nearer than Mars's path, yet comfortably removed. I write this like a note from a harbour wall, the water calm, the wake of a passing vessel smoothing itself back to glass. For a few days on either side, the glare is a noon ocean, bright enough to swallow small ships from sight. Telescopes that sail by starlight must furl their optics and wait. Others, built for these waters, raise their sunshades and slip along the edge. Coronagraphs hiding the blinding disk, heliophysics craft reading the spray where particles run. Infrared eyes feeling warmth where our eyes see only white. The crossing continues whether we watch or not, and that knowledge is oddly kind. At perihelion, the coma behaves like a tide around a hull. Warming lifts the surface ices, gas expands, dust drifts outward, until the solar wind presses it into a pale stream that trails the course. Sometimes the numbers resemble small ripples, sometimes a steadier swell. Both speak of a vessel that holds together as it turns the point and starts the long outbound leg. No sirens, no alarms, just the slow physics of ice and sunlight, of pressure and release. There was a time, hours ago, when the bright field behind the sun might have shown a faint smear, like a wake glimpsed between buoys, if you blocked the lamp just right. That is what the instruments practiced for. One hides the disk and looks for the thin edge of motion. Another listens where warmth hums. Together, they chart the crossing, even when the hull itself is lost in the glare. And together, they write a safe line across the page that we'll read later at dawn. I picture the control rooms as night bays. Doors soft close, screens keep their low tide. A figure leans toward a trace that rises a little more than yesterday, then rests. A second station pings the time, and the log adds one neat line about solar elongation and estimated brightness. the way a captain might mark depth soundings on a paper chart. When the glare passes and the sky darkens again, these marks will be the channel we follow back out to open water. Perihelion itself is not a cliff, but a rounded headland. The traveller does not crash upon it. It curves around, shouldering the constant pressure of light, letting its own rotation steer which patches warm, which jets stir, which particles head seawards along the tail. The curve opens, the course points outward again, and the wake, our quiet wake of light, spreads a little wider before thinning. If the log holds a few short surges of brightness here, we nod. If the line stays even, we nod as well. Either way, the course is sound. There is a kind of patience that lives only on water and in astronomy. You watch the same patch of brightness for long minutes and then longer hours, knowing that most of the time nothing changes fast. Stillness is not emptiness. It is the ocean's way of explaining its scale, and it is the sky's too. And because scale is hard for the body, we keep our metaphors small. A boat rounding a point, a wake flattening, a chart updated, a light left burning in the wheelhouse while everyone else sleeps. And somewhere in that long sentence, if your breath slowed and your shoulders melted toward the mattress, then the story did its work. When sight returns, first week of December for most observers, the first view will be like finding the track again beyond the headland. Predawn, low over the horizon, the glow will be delicate. The tail, more orderly now, will settle into the prevailing current set by the sun's wind, dust, and ions, sharing the channel but keeping their lanes. We will look for how the hue has shifted, for whether the light curve sits higher or lower than before the rounding, for any change in the rhythm that might hint at fresh surfaces turned outward during the close pass. Let's leave a small, still weave here, a minute of room ocean to float upon. The soft draught from a vent like a night breeze across a quiet slip. The faint tick of a wall clock as a buoy tapping the pier. Distant traffic against glass. A harbour far outside the bedroom where no one hurries. Your own breath, an incoming swell and an outgoing swell, even and unforced. The vessel is already past the point. We are only keeping friendly watch from the dock. Some listeners ask whether closed sunlight can crack a hull like this. Sometimes it can, and sometimes the build is steady and the traveller holds. If a fragment breaks away, the wake complicates for a little while. If it does not, the wake smooths and the plot resumes. Either way, our charts are humble. Mark what is seen, label what is inferred, leave the rest as open water on the map until more soundings arrive. The night bay doesn't need certainties to be calm. It needs clear notes and simple ranges, and those we can provide. So the postcard gets its final lines. Perihelion passed in late October. Glare limited the view. Instruments at the bright edge kept the thread. Return to visibility expected with the next dark mornings. Distance safe throughout. Course opening outward with a patient tail. Wake thinning by degrees. Fold the card, place it near the lamp. Let the harbour lights blink their slow pattern through the window, and we will meet the traveller again at the mouth of dawn, where the tide turns and the path is easy to follow. And at 02:14, the room remembers how to breathe. Begin with the room. A low hush from the vent. A thinner hiss from a distant street, the small tick of a clock that seems to soften when you listen longer than a moment. Let that weave be the floor, and on it a faint, breathy layer like cool vapour at the edge of a field just before sunrise. The sky has its own noise, finer than moth wings, a pressure that is not quite sound. Imagine it as a soft exhale passing over micrometers of dust, a nearly silent drift where nothing collides loudly with anything else. Now bring the traveller into that hush as nothing more than a brighter patch inside the vapour. Around the nucleus, gases slip from chilled grains the way a veil lifts from glass, molecule by molecule, until a thin envelope forms. The room's noise folds around that thought and makes it steady. You do not need the names yet. You can hear the effect before the terms come. What matters first is behaviour. A mist gathers. The mist flows. Closer to the sun's light, the faint air around the traveller thickens. Imagine layers of vapour that never wet your skin, threads so fine they are nearly ideas. The pressure from sunlight and from the streaming particles of the solar wind leans into the mist and finds a direction for it. Particles that hold charge align quickly. Heavier grains take their time. Both obey the push, but not at the same tempo. None of it is loud. The room's own white noise is the right scale for it. The ion lane forms like a narrow plume of pale breath in winter, straight and obedient, turned directly away from the sun's face by forces that act invisibly, yet always in the same direction. The dust lane sways more, as if the vapour were thicker, and each grain had a little stubbornness in it. The curve is gentle, a bow in a light fog as a breeze changes just slightly. Between them, space is not empty, only quiet, and quiet is a good place to listen for small differences. If the tail's angle shifts one evening to the next, think of it as a change in the breeze across a field, where the fog rests knee-high and moves without drama. The solar wind is like that, always present, sometimes lean, sometimes a touch stronger. The field lines that carry it can bend the ion lane with delicacy. The dust, with its larger grains, turns more slowly, trailing in a soft arc that remembers where it was a few hours ago. All the while, the body at the centre turns, and with turning, new patches face the sun, and new threads of vapour join the flow. Numbers can live inside this softness without sharpening it. The region closest to the body holds a kind of calm air, a coma shaped by steady escape. Farther out, the vapour thins and organises as if a very faint gradient in the fog decides where pathways should be. And beyond that, the lanes set, eon first and most direct, dust second and more languid. Under certain angles, the thinner lane can kink slightly, the way a cold breath catches when the breeze shifts mid-exhale. Then it smooths again. The room remains the same, vent, street, clock. Near perihelion, glare makes vision difficult for people, even as the physics continues, and the flow does not respect our view. It respects the unseen pressure. So we listen through instruments that do not mind brightness, and their quiet graphs are the sonic picture. A line rises where vapour thickens, pauses where rotation turns a less active face, rises again when a fresher patch warms. You can think of those rises as ripples in fog that cross a lamp beam, visible for a few seconds, then gone, leaving only the knowledge that the air is moving. Across long exposures, the tail seems steadier than a brief glance suggests. That is because mist is faithful to its slope. Where the wind leans, it leans for hours. Where the charge binds, it stays bound until the field rephrases itself. On nights when the wind is quiescent, the ion lane is clean and fine. On nights when the sun's breath complicates, the lane wavers with a tender crease, not a tear. The dust lane, slower to answer, keeps its mild curve and drifts outward, pale as breath on glass dissipating from the centre outward in a circle too large to see at once. Colour belongs here as texture rather than as spectacle. When molecules break and recombine under sunlight, some of that faint glow leans green, a tint that suits the idea of vapour. It does not shout. It is the barest wash along the outer veil, like a thin layer of fog catching a traffic light from blocks away. A small change in tint over days is not an omen. It is a reminder that sunlight is methodical, and the traveller is turning within it, offering and withdrawing patches of surface to the slow chemistry of warmth. If something in you wants speed, the sky offers patience instead. The tail's growth is not an unfurling banner, it is accumulation. Dust grains released a day ago drift beside dust grains released this morning, and their paths, slightly different in weight and shape, produce a soft braiding that no sharp eye fully separates. The braid is part of the lull. It promises us that the scene will be nearly the same when you look again after sleep, because sleep suits phenomena that change by degrees. There is, in the middle distance of the coma, a place where the fog thins enough that starlight pricks through like quiet beads. Astronomers use those points to measure how thick the mist has been in front of them, and in that counting, the vapour becomes even more a sound than a sight, a measure of what passed along the line. Picture, for a long moment, how a whisper seems louder in a soft room. The sky is that room. The whisper is the traveller's escape, counted without rush, translated into a curve that calms more than any single bright image could. Now let one long breath make one long thought. That tales, for all their reach and light, are gentle systems of vapour and dust responding to constant, almost tender forces, so constant that they invite the same steadiness in us. And when we listen to the thin hiss at the edge of the room and set it beside the thought of ions aligning into a fine plume and dust relaxing into a broader arc, we find the scales match. Human breath to stellar breeze, bedroom hush to heliospheric murmur. And in that match, the body understands that there is time to rest. If the glow taps higher one night and lower the next, let it. Fog is reactive and does not owe us a fixed density. If a star briefly peeks through the tail brighter than before, that is only a thinner patch in the veil, not a drama. If a narrow ray appears within the plume and then fades, that is a change in where the vapour found an easier path outward, like a breath discovering a looser seam in a scarf. The soft hiss at the edge remains your guide, an anchor that says the system is intact and the night is on your side. We can end where we began. Sound first, sight second, names last. The vent hums its small river of air. The street is a blurred ribbon in the far distance. The clock's tick lands like dew. The body is warm and heavier against the bed. Let a minute pass with no new thought, and only this weave. A hush that deepens and recedes, a breath that widens and empties, a vapour that gathers and thins, the room holding a fog of quiet that lifts and returns as you float, unbothered, inside it. Begin small, thread small. Picture a fleck near the nucleus no wider than a grain of fine lint, a pale chip held inside a mesh of frost. Sunlight lifts a film from its face, and a microscopic puff loosens it from the weave. It drifts, a hand's breadth in imagination, then another, joining a faint cloth that is forming around everything here. Now look at the seam where ice meets dust. Minute cracks open like stitches, relaxing after a long day. Gas seeps through the gaps and tugs at the neighbouring grains. One lets go, then two, then a soft cluster follows, and the tiny fibres of motion begin to show themselves in the light. Gleam, dim, gleam, like pick and pick on a quiet loom. The pattern is not loud, it is legible. Step out to a space the size of a room, still close by. The envelope is a gauze, not thick, but everywhere at once. In that gauze, threads cross. A steadier jet runs as if along a warp line. A sideways drift shades across like weft, filling the frame with a gentle texture. Where the two meet, the brightness deepens a tone, woven brightness, then softens again. The cloth breathes without flapping. It merely expands and settles in a repeating ease. Take another step outward. The mesh clarifies. Close to the core, the fabric is tight, an almost uniform veil. A little farther out, uneven density shows as mottled cloth where some patches keep more threads and others release them. Pressure from sunlight lays a broad hand across the sheet and draws it away from the star, and the whole piece slides as one, while fresh stitches are constantly added at the center. Color is dye, not paint. If the envelope leans green on a given night, let it be the faintest tint, as though the cloth had taken a light bath in a pale vat and then been wrung out. On leaner nights, the tint fades toward grey. None of this is a costume change. It is simply how the fibres accept or refuse the day's dye bath, depending on what gases are on offer and how the surface turns toward the vat. A quiet fabric can still take colour. Brightness has its own tailoring. The curve that records it climbs like a hem being raised one stitch at a time. Sometimes it pauses at a holdfast. Sometimes it inches higher with a steady hand. Rotation is a tailor's wheel, bringing new panels forward to receive warmth, then taking them away before the cloth can over-thicken. The eye might crave a dramatic fold. The sky gives us subtle seams instead. Across many nights, the pattern becomes truer than any single swatch, and the way observers stack exposures, subtract backgrounds, and register the same faint edges in new frames is itself a kind of weaving, meticulous and calm. Because when line after line aligns at the same place, the mind feels the tension, even out on the loom. Drifts in the background tighten, stray knots are teased flat, and what remains is not only brighter, but also structurally simpler, a proof by cloth rather than by proclamation. Now widen again, until the fabric streams outward in two manners. Along one lane, the threads are fine and nearly straight, as though a bolt were being pulled from the roll with a firm, even hand. Along the second, the cloth is looser, the threads heavier, the edge curving in a slow arc set by the weight in each fibre. Both bolts leave the same loom. They simply respond to different pulls. Where the threads diverge, the eye learns to read which pull prevailed. Texture returns closer in. Within a few thousand kilometers of the core, the mesh is faintly pebbled. Observers call it grain, a small roughness that tells you where fresh stitches have just been laid. Farther out, the pebbles fade into smooth cloth, and only the larger undulations remain. When a new jet opens, it is like a bright selvage added for a while, a narrow strip with tighter threads running cleanly along one side before blending back into the field. When the traveller rounded its closest pass to the sun, the cloth did not tear. It shifted tension. Some stitches tightened where panels warmed, others eased where shade returned with rotation. If a brief surge showed up, Think of a hand drawing the fabric through the fingers a little faster for a few seconds. If nothing surged, think of a careful weaver holding their pace. Either way the panel lengthened, the overall piece moved outward, and the bolt remained in one piece. At dawn in December, you will see the result of this long making. A modest rectangle of faint cloth laid across a corner of the sky, one edge pointing from the sun, the denser weave nearest the body, the looser weave relaxing farther back. Stars behind it prick through like needles popping between threads. In long exposures, they leave thin lines. The fabric remains the constant sheet they cross. And as measurements continue, counts of light, through mesh, color as dye, texture as pattern, the ledger fills with simple, repeatable stitches. We'll end with the simplest motion, hands on the loom at an even pace, thread carried over, beat set gently, panel lengthening, the tension neither slack nor tight. The numbers echo that motion, the images echo the numbers. The story follows both without pulling, until the last exposure of the night lays beside the first like parallel weft, and the line that tells brightness settles to a smooth run. The count steady, and if the ice nearest the surface prefers the colder way, then the first miles of this journey tend to speak in the language of lighter volatiles. Carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide easing out early, as if they found the easier road. If warmth deepens, that road can change. The map redraws itself gently. Should water ice need a shorter distance to the sun before it wakes, then a second phase arrives, our slow thaw, where familiar vapor joins the flow and the halo grows on a more comfortable timetable. Not a switch, more a handover at a way station. If the handover is smooth, brightness will rise like a hill with a long, forgiving grade. If it's patchy, plateaus appear, as if the road has short flats between climbs. If rotation points a more eager face into daylight, then that leg of the route brightens for a few hours. When the nucleus turns away, the path quiets. You can imagine mile markers in light, a small slope here, a leveling there, each marking where the journey's shoulder met the sun. If the spin is moderate, the rhythm is even. If it's quirky, the rhythm off-steps and then finds its beat again. If a crust has sealed old events, new exits open like side roads. Gas follows those detours until the next turn, carrying grains as fellow travelers. The tail remembers yesterday's lanes and today's at once, the way a well-used highway holds traces of many tires. When the pressure from sunlight leans, the lanes lean with it, but the itinerary remains, outward, unbound, unhurried. Pause here for a mid-route still. Let the room be a night road with almost no traffic. The fan is a distant overpass. A refrigerator ticks like a green light cycling under an empty intersection. Somewhere far outside, a single car passes and is gone, leaving air that settles back to ordinary. Your breath sets a pace that a body can walk for hours without strain. Nothing presses. Nothing asks for a turn you cannot make in time. The slow thaw continues, and the route is straight. If an infrared spectrograph hears a set of tones at certain wavelengths, then carbon-bearing gases are likely singing on this stretch. If a millimeter dish finds a narrow crest in its band, then a volatile has raised its hand where eyes cannot see. If optical lines strengthen in the nearer weeks, then water may be joining the convoy. Each if becomes a sign at the roadside. None shouts. Each points. There is a ladder of distances we often climb in thought, far out, where only the coldest travellers stir. Nearer in, where the sun encourages others to join. closer still, where different patches of terrain take their turns. And it helps to say, without heat, that different objects climb this ladder at different rungs, and that a visitor from another system will carry its own rucksack of habits, so the order in which the signs appear along our route may be familiar, or may be an altered sequence that we follow with the same calm attention over dawns and dusks, while the path eases past our star and into wider dark again. If you remember the earlier two interstellar passers-by, then you know how variety relaxes certainty. One traveller offered little fog at all, another offered a smaller, steady coat. This one's slow thaw may borrow from both, an early ease for some gases, a later entrance for others. And that mix is not a contradiction in the atlas, only a new line inked onto a long road map. If the hue leans green on some nights, then small fragments of carbon-bearing gas are breaking and shining in sunlight, like reflective signs catching a headlamp. But colour alone is not the whole map. A green milepost does not tell you the town's name, only that you're on the right highway. We keep our pace easy and let the instruments post their distances in the log. If a chart shows a small surge near the sun, then think of it as a downhill glide where gravity lends speed for a short run. When the grade flattens, the line steadies and the traveller continues outward as planned. The road doesn't swerve toward us, it keeps to its lane. December's gate passes at a polite separation, and the outbound miles open with more sky between us and the glow not less. If a fragment were to peel away, then the route would gain a fleeting spur, more lanes for a while, a little extra glitter in the wake, before the spurs thin and the main road resumes. If nothing peels, then the single file holds, and the miles lay down as evenly as a painted stripe. For sleep, both outcomes are friendly. They differ in scenery, not in safety. If we listen to the journey rather than race it, then the pattern reveals itself with less effort than we expect. Early signs that suit the colder start, later signs that belong to warmer ground, and between them a modest interchange where orders overlap and the convoy reorganizes without fuss. A map like that makes room for quiet. A map like that lets the shoulders fall. That is enough for tonight. 3 handrails set gently in light. First, a name that glows with distance. 3i Atlas, the third confirmed traveller from beyond our sun's keeping. Second, a nearest touch to sunlight in late October, the halo thinned by glare, yet still present as a pale lantern behind brightness. Third, a December separation near an Earth-Sun span, a calm interval with the glow returning to the cool edge of the morning sky. Hold these 3 marks the way a hallway keeps its night lamps, small and steady, enough to guide the gaze without waking the house. I set them along the wall again, so the eye learns the path by softness, not by strain. One mark says what it is, plainly lit. One says when the light bent closest and briefly hid. One says how far the lamp will drift as winter leans in. Each is a modest filament. Together, they make a line of certainty you can follow with your breath. The exhale meeting the second mark, the inhale finding the third, and the room relaxing around that rhythm. Where the first handrail rests, the glow carries the meaning of open curve. It is the quiet signature that the sun can shape but not hold. You need no loud proof tonight. The sign is enough, a traveller that will not close its arc around our star, a point of light that tells the truth by how it keeps leaving. That knowledge is gentle, because it is clear, like a low lamp that never flickers. At the second handrail, the brightness of the sun becomes a curtain. Instruments built for such conditions slip their little shields into place and look for what light can still reach them. A faint grace line at the edge of the glare. A warmth line that says some gas is awake. A thread of scatter where dust begins to obey the day. We cannot see as easily there. The machines can. When the curtain lifts, their notes hang like dim beads along the string, and we rejoin the view without hurry. At the third handrail, distance is a kind of comfort. Imagine the sky offering a simple diagram of light. The sun not yet risen, the visitor a small, soft ember above the horizon, the space between them an uncluttered grey. In that arrangement your shoulders drop because the geometry itself is restful. The angles ask for no defense. The separation glows with sufficiency, and you are free to let the eye graze the ember and return to the room without a pulse of worry or a need to brace. And in the second half of a quiet hour like this one, when the mind is already slower and the body has learned the pace, a long strand of thought can lie down across all three handrails at once, the designation that names the unbound nature, the October nearness that hid more than it revealed, the December ease that lets us look again. And because the strand is unbroken and lit only by small lamps, it teaches without effort, and then lets go, the way a string of lights along a stair can lead upward or down without insisting which way you go. Between handrails, the glow has a conversation with colour that stays within the realm of light, not emotion. Some nights the hue leans toward a delicate green, a familiar tint in cometary gas. Other nights it is greyer, a suggestion more than a stain. Either way, it is still the same lamp. The shade turns slightly, that is all. We note the change, as we might note a bulb warming for a second before settling, and we go on, breathing. Speed belongs here only as brightness pacing. The numbers have their place in ledgers. The room prefers tempo. The point moves through star fields quickly enough that charts update night by night, yet slowly enough that the eye can land on it, leave and return, to find it still within reach of a fingertip on the map. The line it leaves in long exposures is a quiet stroke, and strokes teach direction better than any spoken claim. The 3-mark motif can be used like practice scales. 1. Third, interstellar, an eye written in a small circle of light. 2. Late October closeness, a lamp hidden behind a brighter lamp. 3. Early December morning glow, a comfortable remove. Repeat them once in order, then out of order, and notice that the mind relaxes either way because gentle truth does not depend on recall in sequence. It depends on the presence of the light itself. If we add instruments to the scene, they appear only as tiny indicators on a dim panel. A space telescope status LED becomes a single star that does not twinkle. A spectrograph's trace is a pale line that climbs the smallest amount and rests. A coronagraph's shutter is a square of black that allows a fringe of white to show around it. The panel is not a cockpit. It is a nightstand radio dial from another era, set low, with 3 bulbs softly burning to say, was closest, will be safely seen again. I tilt the frame a little, and the handrail still hold. 1. The identity light does not depend on weather or mood. It is fixed by motion itself. 2. The glare light fades on schedule. When the sun moves to a different portion of the day, patience is the switch. 3. The distance light keeps the room quiet. because its value is simple: enough space to rest. We are not juggling, we are watching 3 points that stay where they ought to stay, and that steadiness is a lullaby of its own. The tail remains an adornment of light on this wall of facts. Where particles align away from the sun, a faint stroke extends. Where heavier dust lags, a slow curve adds a whisper of grey. We do not need to read more than that. The wall itself carries the message. A hallway in which the illumination is even, the sconces are spaced kindly, and the floor is level underfoot. Light describing space so forgivingly that we forget to tense for shadows that never form. When you close your eyes, keep the 3 marks anyway. You'll feel them as cool beads, the name like a small lamp beside a label, the perihelion a soft flash behind a curtain, the December distance at a scale diagram in pale chalk on air. The beads will dim as they do their job, and the hallway will become only the impression of brightness arranged in an order that asks nothing from you. And the image will thin the way goodnight lights thin as the room darkens further. And the glow will be the last thing left, and then less than that. And then only the memory of where the lights were as the far wall recedes and the picture softens to quiet. Follow one hue with me, gently. A thin green thread appears at the edge of the field, not bright, only certain, like a small lamp turned low for a sleeping room. I keep my gaze on that thread and let the rest of the picture dim around it. The mind steadies when light has a single path to walk. Some nights the thread is a firmer line pulled from the halo, a subtle wash that favours the side turned away from the sun. Other nights it loosens into a wider tint, more suggestion than stripe. Either way, it is the same phenomenon. Sunlight stirs molecules into brief little singers, and they return the favour as colour. No trumpets here, only a quiet harmony riding the faint breath around the nucleus. Instruments help tease this out. Through a green sensitive filter, the glow rises a little more than in red. A narrow band, tuned to the wavelengths where carbon fragments hum, will lift a few counts above its neighbours. A spectrograph lays the whole story down as a soft hill instead of a spike, and the hill tells us that many small voices together can sound like one tone when heard from far away. I let the tone hang in the mind while the numbers do their work. Even without devices, the eye can learn the thread's habits. It tends to favour the fresher parts of the coma, the domains where gas is new to the light. As the wind organises things, dust drifts outward and the tint thins. Closer in, nearer the source, the green is most honest. That is simply a matter of time and distance. And because time and distance are kind to sleepers, the lesson arrives without effort. Look near the lamp for the truest shade, and accept the pallor farther out as part of the night. Colour is a language of context, a tilt of phase angle, how the sun, the traveller, and we sit with respect to one another, can nudge the tint. Rotation can as well, turning different surface patches toward the light and changing which gases are freshly broken into glow. A single photograph can look like a verdict. A sequence reveals a temperament. I prefer temperament because its patience matches ours. There is a small pleasure in comparing filters that will never wake a household. Green reads stronger in one frame, red takes a step forward in another. Near-infrared hums softly when warmth rises just enough to be counted. The difference between images is like a dimmer turning half a notch. Nothing jumps, everything leans. On nights when the hue relaxes toward grey, I think of it as the traveller, taking a breath between lines. On nights when the green grows a touch richer, I let it be the same breath exhaled a little more completely. A long, unbroken thought belongs here, because light likes to travel uninterrupted. Across the weeks around closest approach to the sun, the green thread often appears earlier in the evening sequence, higher in the counts as warmer days encourage more gas to sing, then steadies again after the rounding. As the traveller's aspect changes and the fresher patches either finish their brief performance or turn away, leaving a quieter chorus that carries the melody in a lower key, while the dust takes over the role of lingering brightness, and the ion lane holds the posture of direction more than colour. Some observers like to track the thread with ratios, how bright green is to red on a given night, because ratios don't mind thin clouds or a lamp 2 towns away. Ratios are gentle judges. If the number shifts, I read it as a little turn of the shade, not a proclamation. A slight increase might mean that more of the easy-to-wake gases were present near the surface for a time. A slight decrease might mean that dust and water's reflected light are taking the lead. Either way, the melody remains in the same key. The thread can teach quiet geometry too. It rises where the coma is densest and then relaxes along the tail where sunlight favours order over hue. Against star fields, the tint can seem to flicker at the very edge, starlight pricking through, then hiding, then pricking through again as seeing conditions shimmer. That is the atmosphere above us participating in the story, not the traveller changing character. I remember to separate the room's light from the light on the page. When glare hid the visitor near perihelion, the story of colour fell to instruments that do not care about the brightness of day. Their logs recorded the same melody in other forms, a whisper of omission at the bands that colour our eyes green under dark skies. Those lines in a chart are not beautiful on their own. They become beautiful when placed beside the first night back in December, when the pre-dawn air is clear and the thread shows itself again, shy but unmistakable. If the tint seems brighter after the close pass, it may be that new terrain turned outward and offered fresher gas for a few days. If it seems quieter, it may be that what could sing has already sung. Either way, the path remains open, the orbit still unbound, the distance still a soft assurance that the lamp we are following will fade at the easy rate of receding things. The body relaxes at that. The mind can stop checking the dimmer every minute and just let the room be dark. Let me place a still weave here, a minute of light without analysis. The faintest spill from a hallway nightlight across a floor. The way a shaded bulb finds the rim of a glass of water and paints a thin line around it. The suggestion of green from an old radio dial warming its filaments. A curtain's hem catching nothing more than the idea of dawn. And your own breath counting these things, and then forgetting them as the images soften and slip, each one dim enough to leave the others undisturbed. By the time our traveller leans into outward space, the thread has done its work. It has given a readable sign without raising its voice. It has taught us that colour in astronomy is not a shout, but a note, held just long enough to hear the shape of a process. The lesson is mild. Where light is given, meaning follows. Where light thins, meaning rests. I say it once more the way lullabies repeat their last line. The green thread, smaller now, still runs through the scene, and the scene holds because the thread is there to hold it, and then the green thins toward a pale blue, almost a lullaby. We'll take this one as a slow walk along a quiet shore at night. The air is salt-cool in the mind, the water is dark and even, and a pale wake trails where a vessel has just passed. Let 60 seconds of room tide settle first, Orchvak like a far surf, a distant car like one gull calling once, and then not again. Your breath as the small wave that reaches the ankle and slides back without hurry. Step onto the pier closest to the glow. Here, the harbour mouth, is the coma itself, a pool where gases lift from the hull of ice and dust and spread until a current takes them. Two flows begin to separate, quiet as slack tide turning. One finds the straightest way out. The other remembers where it came from and leans along a curve. We'll walk first beside the straighter channel, the ion lane. Think of it as a cold, steady stream that runs directly away from the sun's face, guided by an offshore wind that never tires. Charged particles feel that wind with exquisite sensitivity. They align, they narrow, they keep their heading. Where the shore bends, this channel scarcely notices. It points into open water and holds its line. The effect in the eyepiece is a fine, pale jet, obedient to a rule as simple as down coast. Now follow the softer current, the dust lane. Here the grains are heavier. They listen to sunlight's push, but also to their own weight, so the path swings gently, a slow arc like a river mouth fanning into the sea. It's never a sharp turn, rather an elegant splay that records where yesterday's flow went and where today's is going. Grain by grain, the plume gathers, not as a banner snapping, but as a widening wake that remembers the vessel even after it's far beyond the lights. Pause at a piling and look at the edge where both lanes lie together. On some nights, a faint inner ray brightens like moonlight on a narrow rip. On others, the whole surface is smoother, as if the tide were slack. None of this is spectacle. It is the sea doing what seas do, responding at once to a large, steady force, and to small changes in local weather that tug and ease, without ever howling. The sky's navigation marks help us read the water. Background stars are like buoys along the channel. Where the wake dims them, we know the surface is full. Where they pierce through, the water has thinned. Long exposures turn the vessel into a short streak against those fixed buoys, and the streak is our safe lighthouse. It shows direction clearly while the wake spreads out behind in soft grey. If we watch the straight channel over several nights, small kinks can appear. The way a line of foam bends when an offshore breeze shifts a point or two. That is space weather working at gentlest scale, the solar wind and the sun's magnetic field, setting a new tack for charged spray. The curve answers more slowly. Heavy grains keep yesterday's course for a while before settling into today's. Thus, the wake feels both history and present at once, which is why looking at comets is like walking a beach that stores yesterday's footprints just long enough to show you your own pace. Perihelion lives in this map as a headland we rounded when glare hid the horizon. We couldn't see the water then. We trusted the charts and the buoys that instruments keep even in bright noon. Behind that point, the wake may have thickened briefly as warmth rose. Ahead of it, the wake often lengthens with a tidier look, the straight channel precise, the curved one relaxed. Either way, the shoreline remained where it always is, far from where we walk tonight. Now that we're on the outbound coast, December dawns feel like a beach newly emptied by tide. The straight channel points cleanly down coast again. The curve has a simpler sweep. If the hue along the wake leans a touch green near the harbour mouth, that's the chemistry of sunlit spray, not a warning light. If it greys, it is the same story at a different hour. We take notes without tightening the shoulders. Here is a long, even sentence to walk with, because the body likes a steady boardwalk underfoot when the mind is ready to rest. That tail we have followed, with its 2 companion lanes, one taut like a harbour channel, laser straight into offshore waters, one broad like a spreading wake over a shoal, keeps its form across hours, and then days, because the forces on it are constant and kind at this scale. And as we mark the small kinks that pass along the straight lane with changes in the sun's breath and the slower curves that the heavier grains lay down, we discover that the whole scene is less a drama to witness than a tide table to read, a table that tells us when light will be smooth, when it will riffle, and how both belong to the same reliable coast. There is even a friendly trick for the eye. Stand downwind of your expectations and look along the tail from near to far as though peering over a jetty. The near water is busy with fresh ripples where new spray lands. The midwater is organized into lanes, and the far water is a gloss that merges with sky. Seeing it this way makes distance feel like a shoreline that goes on as long as you need it to, with no sudden drop-offs, no unseen rocks underfoot. Safety, too, is part of a proper chart. The vessel we've been pacing keeps to blue water the whole time, well outside our harbour. In late October, it rounded the headland beyond our reef line. In early December, its wake is visible again from the boardwalk. Later, it will run out toward the open ocean, and the line will thin. Our job is only to stroll and learn how such wakes behave, then turn for home when the cool reaches the sleeves and the lamps along the pier are enough to guide our steps. I stop at the threshold, where the planks meet the sand. The sea is still busy, but not urgent. The wake is tidy. The buoys blink their patient code. At the threshold of the dark field, I rest my hand on the frame. Dear listener, I'll speak to you plainly tonight, close to the microphone of the room itself. The HVAC is a soft river behind me, the clock is a patient metronome, and somewhere a neighbour's elevator adds one low thrum every few minutes that feels like a friendly heartbeat. We can borrow that pulse. We can let it set the pace for what follows. Tonight isn't about new numbers. It's about the comfort of scale. Out there, a small traveller continues its pass by our star, and down here, many quiet rooms like yours hum together. Kitchen tables turned into observing desks, late shifts at small domes, night crews at large ones, servers that breathe in even tones as they pass along images and spectra. You and I are part of that chorus simply by staying with it at an easy tempo. Being the third of its kind is not a contest, it's a chord. One tone from the first wanderer, a companion tone from the second, and now this steady note from a green-leaning comet that will leave as it arrived, unbound. 3 tones make harmony, and harmony is what we trust when our eyes would otherwise chase brightness up and down the staff. You don't need to hold the names. You only need to hear that the song keeps time. If you're tempted to sort every whisper, was that gas or dust, that rise a jet or a change in angle, let the urge soften. Instruments will keep their ledger. It's enough for us to remember the safety refrain. The geometry is kind, Distances are friendly, and the path curves outward after warming. Where there is a lull in images, there is still the low hum of coverage. Where there is a bright night in December, there will be soft confirmations after. Across midnight lines and time zones, monitors blink with the calm of hospital equipment, and logs fill without hurry. One team notes a faint lift in a green sensitive filter. Another records a straightening of the ion lane under steadier solar breath. Another simply writes, "Clear, no change." And the long sentence I have been carrying for you arrives now, because it matches the music of a night like this, when hundreds of small rooms and a few bright laboratories attend to the same distant visitor with the same unexcited care. The collective sound, fans, keystrokes, radio dishes turning, a pencil tapped once to mark a time, becomes a gentle proof that we are listening well enough, long enough, together enough, that the cosmos can reveal itself at a human volume. Let's place a still weave here and leave it alone for a minute. The air vents hush, behaving like rain on a far roof, a refrigerator's compressor rising, then settling, like a breath that lengthens and returns, a dog's collar from 2 apartments over, ringing once and gone, the dry whisper of your sleeve when you adjust the blanket, the very small click a power strip makes when it warms, the unsound that comes between these sounds and holds them in place, which is where rest happens. The pulse is steady. The mind can float. Community is the soft instrument you might not notice until the room goes completely quiet. Amateur logs in both hemispheres keep the edges filled in when larger telescopes face weather or glare. Professionals hand off coverage like a baton. Archived data hums in cooling racks until someone asks it a careful question. Even a rover on another world can, on a good night, contribute a dot of timing to the score. This is not spectacle. It is call and response, whisper to whisper, note to note. When December mornings open a little patch of darker sky before sunrise, the observing rhythm will feel familiar. The tale will hold its 2-part harmony. The coma's brightness will rise, or even out according to how the nucleus turns. Instruments will listen in wavelengths our eyes can't hear. And we will keep the listening posture that helps sleep along. Shoulders loose, jaw unlatched, lungs moving at the speed of bedside machines that are designed to calm rather than alarm. If the logs show a small surge, we take it as a passing crescendo. If they don't, the lull is a rest sign on the staff, valued the same. There is kindness in knowing what won't happen. The traveller will not swerve into our lane. The numbers already make that clear, and the music of those numbers is slow, predictable, untheatrical. You can set your breath to it. Exhale for the count of 4, pause for 1, inhale for 3, pause for 1, and imagine a control room chair rolling a few centimeters across the floor as someone stands to refill a mug. That small sound belongs to this story as surely as a bright line in a spectrum. I'll close the letter the way I would close a lab notebook when a shift ends. A last look at the heartbeat graphs. A last sweep of the eyes across a finder frame where the moving dot is right where ephemerides said it would be. A line that says, hand off clean. Then the lights step down, the fans keep their key, and the night continues its work without you needing to carry it any further. You can let your shoulders drop here. I'll keep listening. The lab is a dim rectangle at the edge of the night, and we are the late shift with the ledger open. Chairs roll a little. Screens hold their lines. A pencil waits beside a cup ring like a small stitched circle on the desktop. The room breathes at a low, even rate. We match it without thinking. I pull the newest frames into a grid. Each one is a patch of sky sewn to the next by coordinates and time. The traveller runs across them as a faint seam, not flashy, only correct. Where we stacked last week's exposures, the weave tightened. Where we added tonight's, the cloth lengthened. Notes in the margin is how this work feels. Small, square letters beside steady rows, a careful hand adding a line that says simply, "Still outbound." On one display, the timeline sits like a bolt folded into thirds. Early October has its tag, a side glance near Mars's orbit, geometry kind, but signal faint. Late October is the bend where sunlight pressed hardest. Glare stitched a bright strip across our view, and we relied on instruments that can cover overexposed sections without tearing the fabric. Early December is the quiet panel waiting to be filled when the Predawn returns. None of these patches clash. They belong to a single cloth. Another screen keeps the tail maps. The straight fine lane leaves the nucleus like a taut thread. The broader dust lane billows as a looser weft. When solar wind conditions settle, the pattern looks cleaner. When they vary a little, narrow creases appear and then smooth. We tag the changes with pins the colour of unbleached linen, because nothing here needs worn-in paint. This is a sampler of forces arranged by patience. A log window holds brightness curves in rows that resemble parallel hems. The line rises, rests, rises again by a few counts. Rotation can do that, and we write aspect in a small box as if hemming the reason to the edge so it won't float away. Colour ratios sit nearby, swatches cut from different filters and set side by side. None shout. They whisper in a way that makes long hours go by gently. Someone wheels past with a thermos and leaves a short thread of steam in the air. It folds itself into the room and is gone. The ledger gains 3 entries: time, pointing, exposure. I write a 4th in the margin, just a dot to mark how the night felt when the graph took a soft step upward. No one needs that dot. Still, the habit helps the cloth of memory hold together when we think back through the passage. We have a short agenda on the whiteboard. First, measure whether the spin has shifted a minute or two after perihelion. Second, compare pre- and post-perihelion colour ratios at similar angles to see if fresh surfaces joined the light. Third, trace the tail's inner structure for any new narrow features. If present, follow them for an evening or two and let the creases relax. Fourth, keep distance notes clean. December's nearest pass to our line is friendly, around the scale of an Earth-Sun span, and nothing in the numbers asks for a change of tone. On the shelf, a binder carries pages about what comes next. Jupiter receives a mention as a far-off checkpoint months from now, not a plan so much as a margin note. Geometry distant, large body, small effect. The way a quilter might jot a comment about a border that may or may not be added when the centre is finished. More certain is the way the piece leaves us, edge drifting toward the dark, count by count. We will log until signal thins. Then we will press the cloth flat, label it, and file it where future hands can unfold it. A long sentence belongs here, because a long piece of cloth is what we have been making. That a survey system found a moving thread and handed it to follow-ups that stitched exact positions night after night. That heliophysics craft seemed over the bright gap when our eyes could not. that a space telescope added smooth panels to show the coma's texture, that amateurs added narrow strips to widen the quilt north and south, and that the whole, when spread across months and across instruments, resembles less an image than a fabric of agreement, whose softness is precisely what lets a body go slack in a chair at 3 a.m. without losing the thread of the story. I save and mirror the data. Redundancy is a second layer of backing. A status light confirms the copy, and the fiber of the network carries the night to the archive. The screen clock touches a quiet minute, and the team on the earlier coast signs off. We take the handoff and set our needle in the same hole, not eager, not slow, just regular, making one more small stitch where it belongs. If you listen, you can hear the cloth itself. Not a sound, exactly, but the sensation of a surface that has settled under gentle tension, like a sheet pulled smooth over a mattress before sleep. We do not tug. We smooth once, twice, and let go. The numbers reward that discipline. They prefer a steady hand and a clean edge to anything hurried or embellished. I write a last line in the notebook. Predawn next week. Repeat sequence. Compare panels by phase. Then I draw a tiny square beside it, a symbol we use for quiet conditions. It looks like a patch pocket, waiting for whatever the morning brings. The room's breath stays even. The ledger closes. I set the pencil down along the notebook spine so that nothing creases between now and the next opening. I set the dial to night. We end with what is certain and kind. A small traveller with an open, unbound path crossed our charts this year. It was found by an all-sky watch, confirmed by many hands, and framed by images where a soft coma gathered and a 2-part tale took its patient shape. Closest to our star came in late October, when glare asked us to lean on instruments that make their own night. Early December offers an easy return to the pre-dawn, where the glow can be seen again at a gentle distance. Nothing in the geometry asks us to brace. The separation near December sits around the scale of the Earth-Sun span, safe and ordinary for a visitor that will not turn back. Across the weeks, brightness rose, paused, and rose again by small steps, the way rotation and sunlight often arrange themselves. Color leaned green at times, when gas spoke more clearly. At others, it softened toward grey, as dust carried more of the light. This is how a cosmos-sized story fits on a pillow. Numbers became rhythm. Images became breath. Instruments took turns and agreed. The path bent around our star and continued outward as planned. You listened long enough to hear the shape of it, which is more than enough. I'll leave one quiet note before the room goes fully dark. The next clear morning will arrive, whether or not you see it, and the traveller's line will be right, where the ephemerides said, moving one calm increment farther into the wide, familiar dark. Thank you for keeping watch with me a while. May the shoulders stay low, the jaw stay loose, and the breath choose the easy cadence. Good night.